Okay. Hello, everybody. I have not given a presentation in over 6 years. I haven't been in an office in over 6 years, so there should be a little bit of a learning curve here with me trying to figure out how to do all of this, and hopefully it works out where you can see and hear everything. Um, but let's see. Okay, so this is the ancestry of the Purkeys as far as where I could find the information. So, where did I find most of this information? So, some of it is from Thank You, Nita, giving me Aunt Anna Mae's giant binder and folders full of genealogy records. So, a lot of the stuff that I had already found, I was able to verify against her records and clarify some things that were incorrect or maybe narrow down the family member better than where I had found it on the internet. So, the other big place I found it was through Family Search, which is a database that is ran and compiled by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, so the Mormons. Why perhaps are the Mormons keeping everybody's genealogical records online? I wanted to know, so I looked into it, and they believe in something called baptism by proxy, which means they think that family exists beyond the mortal life we are in, and that as long as you can prove through documents your bloodline heritage to the people of your ancestry, you can then baptize them by proxy. And they have sacred sealing ceremonies in temple so that they can baptize dead ancestors so that they can all end up together in heaven, I guess. They started the genealogical work in 1894, and they set up the nonprofit, which is Family Search, which is a website you can go to. That it's crazy. It has a bunch of stuff. Anything that's kind of been online, they put in there. You can find documents in there. So a lot of the things that we're going to see that I found are things like death records, obituaries, war records, draft cards, and census records. So they'll link people in there, but the information isn't always correct because, back then, a lot of people in the families either changed their last name little bits at a time or you named your kids after your brothers or yourself, and there's many, and you had 14 kids, so therefore there's lots of same name people, so it's difficult to figure out which Thomas is this Thomas, which Elizabeth is this Elizabeth. So a lot of the things that we're going to see that I'm going to show up on here can be wrong. So when we originally did this and when I went through this presentation, for instance, I just copy and pasted some stuff over, and then I little by little have been looking into the pieces as I go. And sometimes dates are wrong. So for instance, Dan and Marilyn I had in there as being born in 1936, which we know is wrong because they just turned 90. So um, some of the dates, some of the names, some of the people might not be correct. And it's as I've gone through, and there's so many. So as I go through and I figure out, oh, like this might not even be the right guy. I've been trying to update, so some of the stuff in these slides is not correct. And Jean, if you're watching, you might have a lot more information than I have. And there's a couple family lines where there's holes, and I have no information. I have uh, nothing I can confirm online from other people putting stuff in, and nothing from Anime stuff. So also, aside from Family Search and Anime, I have like just Googled stuff and found that other people, and a lot of them appear to be like late 90s websites, but a lot of people have put their genealogical records online in a website. So then the people you search come up in there, and then you can trace them back. So a lot of these people I'm able to trace back to like the ship that they immigrated over on, or early census records. There's a lot of people in your family history that have been in America for a very, 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 very long time. Okay, so let's get into, you should know these people. They were alive and when you were alive. So we're going to skip and we're going to go to this bottom line, but this is kind of how I have presented it in my head. So the youngest person will be at the top of the screen. So Marilyn, for instance, and then her parents, and then their parents. So we're going to go into the bloodlines of Amanda, Edward, Bertha, and Harry. And if I pronounce names wrong, I'm very sorry. I'm just what I got. So just making it up as I go. And there's so many people. It's hard. Okay, so we're going to go into some pictures I was just recently given here. So you should know these people here. I don't know if you can see my mouse or not. If you can't, the kids in the center are Doris and Dorothy. So then their parents above them, and then the picture from 57, you guys should know, you are in this picture, so you should know those folks. That's baby Nita. They're being held by Dave in the center of that one. Okay, so next here. All right, so if you can see the colors, awesome. If you can't, I'm sorry, I made them really close together, and I'm realizing that after I gave the first presentation and I haven't fixed it. But the people at the bottom of the screen are the oldest. If they have the bright blue color, they are a Revolutionary War veteran. If you see the ancestor number there, those I think are the right ancestors through the Daughters of the American Revolution records that they have. So I recently joined the Daughters of the American Revolution group. Anyone can join in this family. If you have any interest, let me know, because it should be easy since I've been verified. But we have a lot of Revolutionary War veterans in this family, as well as there's a couple Civil Wars, there's some War of 1812s, and some other things, so we'll get through those. But anybody with the bright blue color like Johann and Conrad, those are going to be veterans. The black at the bottom is the people who are the immigrants that came directly to America. So in all of these bloodlines, I just kind of went back that far. I went back as far as the people who came over on a ship, or the Revolutionary War, because some of them go back way further than that and have been here since the 1500s. And it got too many people. So we are going to start with the Oberholzers, that side. So you can see in red. I have then, I think looked into that Hans is his father. It gets confusing, but Jacob, the Reverend, came to Ohio in 1806. He was the first Mennonite minister. Let's go to the next page here. In Columbiana County. He had 2 wives. He had 7 kids with his first wife. And then he had 14 kids with his second wife, Elizabeth. So, let's see if I can go back here. So Elizabeth, that we are related to, was his second wife. Now, Jacob and Elizabeth, they both lived to be 82 and 81, so great for them. I found records that they had twins, so I don't know if this comes from them or not, but that was some twins that I found. Let's see. Elizabeth's some fun facts. So I found fun facts that we'll get through each one of these people as if I could find them. Elizabeth's last child, she was 45 years old. So she had her 7 stepkids, And then she had her own kids. So she raised 20 kids together, all together, with her last birth being at 45. So to me, that's crazy. Go you, Elizabeth. But okay, so he was the first Mennonite minister in Ohio. And he started a church. It was called the Oberholzer Church. It then changed names to the Midway Church at some point. But it started as a log church in 1825. Um, he was known, he was a teacher as well as the Reverend. He was known as a forceful speaker and a physically powerful man. So at one point in 1828, it became state law for public schools for having public schools. The church that he founded voted to become public, which meant that by law, he now had to teach in English instead of German. And that made him angry, so he left the church and moved to Ashland in Wayne County. I found this, let's see if we go into here. There is a deed from the bottom part with the yellow highlighting, I think is a deed from a land transfer when they moved to one of their sons. And then the yellow and above is the marriage record between Jacob and his second wife, Elizabeth. And then some of the links on the side, if you get this PowerPoint and you can go to them, that's where I'm finding some of this information and some of the family history. Some places, again, have websites that have a bunch of stuff. So in one of these things that I found in Anna May's records was a newspaper article from a Mennonite newspaper. So these are like, the Amish. And I don't know if this is like a slander article, like they were trying to slander Jacob Oberholzer's name for leaving the church, because it could be that, or if it's actual historical truth. But the article is about how he supplemented his farm income by distilling whiskey, and it was known as Oberholzer whiskey. And this was from a Mennonite historical bulletin. So it could be either, they were trying to slander his name when he left the church, or that he was actually brewing whiskey in, teaching. We don't know. So take with that what you want. If you have more information on him, please let me know. But let's see, we're going to move on to Jacob. He married Elizabeth. So Elizabeth comes from a big Mennonite family. I'm going to pronounce them as Mullinger. She lived to be 81 herself, so good for her. The Mullingers and the Oberholzers together basically founded Mulhoning County. The Mullingers and the Oberholzers are from Germany. They were all Mennonites. They came to the Americas and then ended up in Ohio eventually. The Mullingers have a historical farm, as you will find most of our family does. Their son, so if we go back here, so however you pronounce this man's name, and Margaretha, they also had a bunch of sons, right? So the sons are going to inherit the family farms, not our Elizabeth. She might get a chunk of it, but she didn't get the whole thing. But we can trace the farm back to her brother, Dad. So here's some more links on this one. Here's some pictures of the farm. It's in Wayne County. Melchior. Thank you. I wrote myself a note here. There's a lot of online history about this farm. I have some articles I printed out. I obviously don't have them here for you. They're in these links here. They raised flax and sheep. They were Mennonites, so they avoided most of the wars, so that will be out of there. Down here in the bottom of this page, you can see the 1800 census that says Melchior Mullinger was the overseer of the poorhouse. They came here, they cleared Ohio forests in Wayne County, and they started farms and so they were where they were cut off from market, so they kind of, worked together as the Mennonites do. This farm stayed in the family until 2002. So relatives from the original Mullingers who started the farm, they had it up until 2002, and then they donated it to Ohio State University for research on small to mid-scale sustainable farming practices, which made me really excited. Um, so there is a link in here to the article, um, where they talk about it and they pulled these pictures from, and there's some more pictures. So it's pretty cool. You can go visit it, I think, because it's now owned by the college. So awesome. That should cover that side of Bertha's Oberholzer family. So then her other side of her family, so her mother, Margaret, we're going to go into her family. So as you can see, we're going into the Johann Kosher. I'm going to say I don't have a whole lot of information on them. As you can see, I believe he was a Revolutionary War veteran, and I also think he was the immigrant who came here from Palinate, Germany. They were immigrants. They came to, oops, here we go, Pennsylvania. I don't have a lot of information on them, and then he married a Clint, so same. There's not a lot other than I think they were in the Revolutionary War. The names get kind of conflicting, so I need more research on them. That's pretty much all I could find. So, Jean, if you've got anything, let me know. Otherwise, we're going to go into the plasterers, which is up here. You can, at the very bottom, see Conrad Plasterer. He was a Revolutionary War veteran, or as we call them, patriots. The Plasterer family, again, that last name comes from, obviously, they were bricklayers, masons, stone workers when they came over, so they kept that last name. Their parents immigrated from Palinate, Germany. Conrad served in the Revolutionary War for 4 years. Oh yeah, this guy. But he kept he kept leaving during the winter, so he had to pay fines because he couldn't stand the cold. So he would like come home for the winter and be like, "I'm not, nope, sorry, not happening." He had 9 kids. This on the right hand side of the screen is the 1790 very first census that he is listed on. I can't make out much more information other than he's there. I don't know what, this might be a tax document now actually that I'm looking at it, but so that's fun. That was the thing I could find on them. Let's see. So we're going to switch over. So we were on Bertha's Oberholzer side. So now we're going to go to her mother, which is Jacqua. Clara Jacqua, and then she has maybe my favorite guy in this whole thing. So we're following Clara to her parents, her dad's side of the family. And I've got the green here on this one. They served in the War of 1812. So Richard Jacqua on the screen and also David Egbert. Okay, so they have a lot of information. We're going to go to the next page because we have pictures. There in the center, that is Richard. Colonel Richard Jacqua. He has a little excerpt in the history of Seneca County called The Fascinating Life of Richard Jacqua. He, with his family, settled in Canada. They had 200 acres of land, and he was drafted from Canada into the British Army in the War of 1812. He was like, absolutely not. Nope. And let's see if I've got the quote here from him. No. But he was like, I am an American. I'm fighting for this country. I belong to this country. So he helped other men leave Canada and escape across the St. Lawrence River because he was skilled with boat and river knowledge. So he would help smuggle men from Canada over to fight for the Americas against the British in the War of 1812. He fought at the Battle of Big Sandy Creek in New York. You can go there. There's information in Sackett's Harbor. After the war, he was given land, and his family in 1813 started hauling timber and lumber to harbor in New York. And then eventually in 1882, he ended up in Eden Township in Ohio in Seneca County. And he was extremely active in local affairs. So the left hand side of the screen is Richard and Elizabeth, his wife. And on the right hand side of your screen is Letitia and Ambrose. That's their children. We'll get to them in a little bit. But Richard and Elizabeth had were married for over 70 years. Richard died when he was 91 and Elizabeth was 86. So good for them in the 1800s. They ended up in Seneca. He had the largest funeral at the time at 91. That makes sense. They had 160 acres. In 1820, they paid in gold coins about $200 for their 160 acres. They cleared woods. Ambrose, there on the left hand side, was 9 years old when the log home was built. Together, Richard and Elizabeth had 13 kids. Eventually, in 1851, they moved into a smaller framed house instead of the cabin, and it was closer to Honey Creek, where they traded with natives and other families. Their apple orchard that they had planted lasted until the 1970s. He was a Masonic frat member. His first presidential vote was for James Madison, 1808. Ah, there I did have the quote. He would not take up arms against his native land. And so he ended up fighting for the Americas. Let's see. We're going to talk a little bit about Elizabeth because there's not a lot of information on women throughout history. So, ladies of our family, please write down your history so we can have it because I guess, Anna May is the first person where we start getting women's point of view, women's history. So there is a little bit, because she lived so long and they were married for 70 years, about Elizabeth. She was a pioneer woman who had all these babies in the cold and in the forests and in the woods in this new land. She had 13 kids from 1810 to 1834. So she had 24 years of childbearing. Her last child was Olivia, who they called Olive, who inherited the framed house in the land. She was the last Jaqua in Eden Township, and she died of consumption in 1880. And so we'll get into Elizabeth's family next as we go back over. So Elizabeth Wiltese was married to Richard Jaqua, and they ended up in Ohio and founded stuff. Prior to that, she came from further east. I think she did end up, yeah, they ended up in Canada because these two, so the Wiltese family, they are Revolutionary War veterans as well, but for the British. So they ended up in Canada and they ended up fighting for Britain. John and Jeremiah both fought in the Revolutionary War for the Brits. In this slide, we can see when John came to Poughkeepsie, New York. So this is a census, the first census from 1790 in Poughkeepsie, New York. You can see John Wiltese was the owner of 2 slaves. So this is the one family that I can find where there's slave ownership for sure. And they also fought for the British. So boo to the Wiltese family, but they were British loyalists. They settled in Lees County, Ontario after the Revolutionary War in 1793. John Wiltese, let's see, I can go back here. John Wiltese had 14 kids with his second wife, Mary, who I think is who we're related to. It's kind of hard to tell. He was his brother. Okay, so John's brother was a British spy. So he would come into the Americas and spy. Oh yeah, and John died of face cancer. So he owned slaves and died of face cancer. The fun fact about them too is that the Canadian settlement that they lived in was called Wiltese Town. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right. Then it turned into Farmersville, and it is now known as Athens. So there's an Athens, Canada, which was once the farm owned by our Wiltese relatives. Jeremiah, so the dad here, the grandpa, whatever, he was born in Newtown, Long Island, so he's been here a very long time. He took over his father's business, which was a store. So he sold clothing, wool, flour, farm produce, trades from Europe, sugar, salt, spices, in Fishkill Landing on Hudson River. He moved to Canada due to supporting the British, and he married twice, both of them named Mary, and he had 12 kids total. So these two um, were British loyalists, this family, and owned slaves. So yay for them. Okay. Next side, we're going to go to, so as we first back there when we were talking about the Jaquas, we'll get to their picture again. It should show back up. But we're now on to Letitia Egbert, who married Ambrose Jacquot. And we're going to go down that family. As you can see, there's a lot of, everyone's a veteran. So the green, again, is the War of 1812, and the blue is the Revolutionary War. As you can see, for Jeremiah Williams here, his dad, senior, I believe died in the war. And Jeremiah joined when he was young. Again, the dates are questionable. He had to fight to prove he was in the war for his pension. And his pension was not awarded until after he died. But Jeremiah was enlisted in 1778 in Maryland. For fighting in the war, he received 100 acres of land. And then again, his senior most likely died in the war itself. So here's one gravestone, and then here is the record of the pension payout there. Fun Jeremiah Williams. So there, when I'm looking up Jeremiah Williams, I came across another Jeremiah Williams who is from the same place. So from Maryland in the same location. So I'm assuming it's like our Jeremiah's uncle, because due to the age, it doesn't make sense. But there is a link here. The last link here is links to court records from Maryland from September 16th of 1752. And it's a really fun story. It's a different, or I believe, probably a relative, Jeremiah Williams. And he goes on this drunken rampage of terror through Maryland, and he it's this guy telling this tale to the court about how Jeremiah made him do all these drunken things, and they were stealing sheep and eating them, and they were running around with, I think, like some slaves, and they were stealing food from people's kitchens, and they were stealing tobacco, and they were stealing sheep and eating them, and they were breaking into homes, stealing rum, stealing 12 hats, they bacon, more sheep. I was like, just it's funny. It's a great little drunken story about them. Crime, a life of crime for a Jeremiah Williams that I do not believe is our Jeremiah Williams. All right, moving on to the Egberts. So this James Egbert is the ancestor that was easiest to prove lineage to through paperwork to get into the Daughters of the American Revolution organization. So he is technically my patriot, our patriot through the organization that we have proved through paperwork, bloodline, that we are related to him. So David Egbert in the green he died when he was 83. So another very long living person in our family. He was in the War of 1812. He was a farmer. He died of old age. In 1814, he came to Fairfield County with his brother. They moved to Seneca in 1822 and founded a Methodist church. Oh, we've got some pictures of them. So here, back to Letitia. You can see her. And we're talking about her dad right now. He moved to Seneca County, founded a Methodist church with his brother Uriah, who is down here in the bottom corner. So there's pictures of him. Up at the top is David Egbert's draft card from the War of 1812. He had 10 kids. And then his dad, James, was in the Revolutionary War. He was a miller. He was from New Jersey. He died of pneumonia, but he was a descendant of Dutch immigrants, and they came over on a boat like this called de Bonte Cow, the Spotted Cow. And they came over in 1660 to New Amsterdam as indentured servants. So they came over with indentured servitude that they worked off, and then ended up. So, yep, there. Okay, so moving on, we are now moving to a different family member. So now we are into the Purkeys. So we are on to Harry Orlow Purkey. We all know him, love him. His dad, Henry. Going down the line, we are now on Agnes. And then her dad was John Manifold. I had a picture from something, but for some reason it disappeared. Okay, so John Manifold, the original John Manifold, immigrated from London at 17 on the British ship the Blessing in July of 1635. He went from London to Massachusetts Bay, and he was most likely an indentured servant, especially at 17. So if we look into him, I bet we'll find some records of him winning his freedom or working off his freedom. And then our John Manifold was in the Revolutionary War, and he was already a fifth generation American at the time of the war. So that to me is insane that we've 5 generations already here. He knows nothing else, and he's in the war. So there is some links to some information on the Manifold family as well. Okay. Where am I? Okay. We're going into the Purkeys. Most of the information I have on the Purkeys is coming from Anna Mae's information because there's not really anything online. So at the end of Anna Mae's information is like she started looking into the last name Purkey because it probably, since they're German, it could have been a lot of other things. Like there's reference to Berkey, like with a B. There's Perkapile, Berkebile, Perkapile, Perkypile, Berkey, Birkenbiel. Apparently the German, the Biel, they can drop whenever they want. So they may have been left with Purkey. There's a Jesse Perkypile who lived from 1804 to 1833 in Gallion Cemetery, whose dad, Andrew Birkenbiel, migrated to Somerset, Pennsylvania. We'll get into that. So the Purkeys, if any of you guys have information further than Jacob, please let me know because I don't have it. We couldn't find it. I can't find anything past Jacob being born in Pennsylvania. Jacob and Agnes had 11-ish kids in 20 years. 6 lived to have more kids. They had 240 acres in Hancock County, I think. And then they had Jacob Ambrose Purkey moved to Ohio in 1832. 240 acres of land, born poor, Methodist, lifelong Republican, held in high esteem by peers. They had Henry or Purkey. He flipped land, so he would buy land, cut down stuff, and sell it. And then, so Agnes loved giving money to foreign mission work. She had 11 kids, 10 boys, 1 girl, cleared land to finish okay, yes. So Jacob and Agnes, when they moved to Ohio, they cleared land to finish their cabin on Christmas Day in 1832 when their oldest kid was 1 year old. None of their information is really online. It's mostly from Anna Mae. Jean, hopefully you have more information. And let's see. There is Harry and his brother Robert, both married Oberholzer sisters. So I found that to be a little fun too. So we've got some pictures that were in her book. This is Henry, not Harry, Henry. So his dad. And Martha McKee, who we're going to talk about next, her family. So Henry and Martha had Harry. And let's go into the McKees because they're also interesting too. So Thomas McKee. This is the last person I was looking into before I came down for Dan and Marilyn's thing. So I don't know if I necessarily have the right person. There is a lot of McKees and they have a lot of the same names, and they get a little iffy on their wives and whatnot. So we're going to go to Thomas, who I believe was there is a Thomas who is a Revolutionary War veteran. And I don't know how we're related to him, but I'm pretty sure he is a great great grandfather in this sense. Here's a picture of Junior. Here's a bunch of stuff about them. There is a newspaper article that I found about them. So Thomas was an Indian trader, I think most likely Irish. He knew Delaware Indian language and he married a native woman. But I believe he had 3 wives and at least one was native, but one may have been a white woman captured by natives, raised with natives, but was not native. So it gets really wishy-washy. He probably was a tall talesman based on a lot of this stuff. He was either Irish or Scottish, and his wife was native or not, and we don't know who is who and what is what. But Thomas was a British loyalist and a spy for them and a native translator. He had a big part in ridding Ohio of their native population due to him being able to be sneaky and tricky and speak the language and be a tradesman. So he got them to move out of Ohio in kind of horrible ways, and he was also in the war. His young pussy. So Robert, who I think we are related to, and what my looking up was, Robert McKee, was possibly the youngest son of Thomas McKee, making Thomas like 50 when he was born. So there is an article about a land dispute between Robert and the oldest child of Thomas over some land because of bloodline. Needs a deeper dive. What the Mormons have listed in the family page does not match what Aunt Anna May has listed. So we might be related to one of Thomas's brothers, or we're related to his very youngest son. Robert married an Elizabeth as his second wife. So it was hard to find that information, and they need a bigger, deeper dive as well. They're confusing. And let's see, what is this one? This is a death certificate that lists Robert McKee and Elizabeth Simmons, which matches what Aunt Anna May has, but the Mormon site has a different wife for him, so it doesn't make sense, and there's a conflicting information. So we shall move on. Okay, so now we're going to Amanda Myers Goddard. Hopefully you guys know who that is, so we can move on here. So we're going down her dad's bloodline. If you are seeing really crazy lines linking everybody together, I don't know why it's doing that. I'm sorry, but if you just kind of follow down the line here, we're going from Amanda Myers to John Myers. We have a new color here. This orange is Civil War. So John Edward Myers, Matthias Tombaugh, both Civil War veterans. And then John Myers' dad and grandfather were both in the Revolutionary War. George was born in Germany. He signed the oath and fought for the Revolutionary War in Maryland. His son Henry was also in the Revolutionary War for Maryland. He built the first grist mill on Clarendon River when he was 14 when the war started, so he was a gunsmith. I have a picture of him. And then I have a picture of Henry and then his son, John Edwards. So that's going to be on the next page. So Henry was 14 when he fought in the Revolutionary War as a gunsmith. And his son, John Edwards, there he is for his Civil War. There is a lot of information about what these two did during the war through these links here on the side. John Edwards lived to be 85. So go him. John Edwards, if we go back here, and Matthias Tombaugh, the two dudes in orange here, fought together in the Civil War. So then when they came home, John married Matthias's daughter. So cool for them. And this link kind of comes through. That's confusing. And then here we have a picture from Anna May with there was a Tombaugh and Myers family reunion. So there's Catherine and here's John, the two in the center. Some other relatives behind them. I didn't label them here. In the next picture, it's also going to be them in the center. So that's John Edward Myers in the center and Catherine Tombaugh. And on Catherine's lap, that baby is Aunt Anna May. And then there's going to be some other people that I had the picture that I was passing around when I did this presentation. And there's a list that I don't know if I can grab it. I can't. That has some other people that are in our family are labeled. Obviously, it's a family reunion, so there's other people in our family that are labeled in here. But the person that you would know would be Aunt Anna May, and she's the baby shown there. So next, we're going to come all the way to the side. So Catherine Tombaugh, if I'm pronouncing that right, her dad, and then I think her mom. God, that's cute. Why did it do that? I'm so sorry, guys. But we're going to John Horn. John Horn was in the Revolutionary War as well. Let's see. So a series of 3 books were published in a newspaper originally between 1933 and 1936. They were then made into these books you see down here. There's 3 volumes of books in 1945. 2 of the 3 books have been valued and discredited, but the book with maps has been proven to be good. So apparently John Horn, or somebody John, when he came to Ohio after the war, he kept a set of journals that a family member found later in the 30s and published them. And he didn't want any money for publishing them or anything like that. But researchers looked into the journals and found that they were discredited because people who he has living in the journals with the certain dates have been proven to have been dead and not in those areas at those times. So nobody knows who has fabricated the journals, if it was John himself, if it was a family member after John, if it was the person in the 30s who published them, even though it's not thought that it was him because he wasn't really seeking fame or anything. He was just like, this is cool, let's publish these journals from early expansion in Ohio. Early westward movement. So he had native maps. That's what the maps are, which have been validated and are good. They're maps of early Ohio and native stuff, but the journal records are not. Let's see, the Horn family, Solomon, that's not right. Okay. There's some gravestones of John and Catherine, and then the Horn papers, and then some information on those books. So Solomon, God, I'm so sorry that these lines are all messed up. We're going to the second to last family here, the Tombas. So, as you can see, they've been here a pretty long time as well. You can follow those red circles down. I know it gets really confusing. Um, so, Matthias was in the Civil War, and then his dad was Solomon. His dad was George Washington Tombaugh. He was in the Revolutionary War along with his father, who died in the war most likely. And then that guy's dad came from Palanate, Germany as well. As you see, that place comes up a lot, but okay. So Jacob and John Jacob came from Palanate, Germany originally, went to Holland, married his wife, came to America on the ship named Albany in 1728 in Pennsylvania. Jacob, so that was John, and then Jacob most likely died in the Revolutionary War, and his grandson George Washington Tombaugh fought in the Washington County Militia for the Revolutionary War. In 1785, he was awarded 98 and a fourth acres that are named he named Haw Bottom on Pigeon Creek in Pennsylvania. So let me go to this next page. So we're talking about George and Solomon here, these two red circles. So the map with the red dot shows you where Pigeon Creek is, south of Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania. An alternate spelling for this family, also I should state, is Dombach. So again, another family whose last name probably changed throughout time. There's some information about his wife. Finally, another woman who was listed. She fought off wolves, and they were farmers who transported goods to and from Ohio. George Washington also ran a distillery, and he owned land in Stark County, Ohio, which I believe is what's pictured there as that farm, because his son Solomon moved to Ohio in the picture and lived on that farm near Canton. And then Matthias, yep, he served in the Civil War from 1862 to 1863. Okay, so last family that I have zero information on is the Goddard family. There's a very little bit in anime stuff too, so if anybody has info, please let me know. But there's some, is it Goddard? Is it Godderer? I am not sure. But I think Michael immigrated from France to New Albany on the ship called the Lions in 1838. I think he was German but married in France. Recently, I just got these pictures after being in Athens that these are both labeled Goddard family. I don't know who they are. This lady in the awesome hat with the nun is named Mom, so I can only assume. And then, I found, here's where, what is this one? I don't think I wrote down what this even is. This is I think maybe their immigration card when they came over. Yeah, there's the ship, the Lions there, and the date they came over and where they were last in France. So this is Michael and Catherine. And then so that said they were in France, that last one. And then this one here's a Catherine Goddard's death certificate that shows Michael Goddard born in Germany and Catherine Berger born in Germany. So, are they German? Are they French? I don't know. But we're going to get into that because I've got some more information about the region that the most of the people came from. We're almost done. That's all I have for family. Again, it's so many people, so I don't have information on all of them, and anything that's not online that was kept, through the family, I don't have. So, all right, a little bit more background information. So going through and just loosely like jotting stuff down, this is what I've come up with as if somebody has a DNA test record and you have that and it matches this or is close to this, I'd be really interested to see it because that sounds fun. But everybody comes from this one specific region that I've been pronouncing as Palanate, which I think is the British pronunciation because I looked it up and it's pronounced, I'll get to that. I have a slide on it too. A little bit of England, a little bit of Scotland, a little bit of Ireland. Here's where all of those are. So, refresher of the map of Europe. I put some big hearts on the places that we're coming from here. So, the lower heart, we're going to talk more about that region. And then you see Ireland and the UK. I had to look it up because this country region comes up a lot and I didn't know how to pronounce it. So Palinate. I'm just gonna keep saying Palinate because that's how it is in my head, but I don't think it's gonna play it for it. No. Okay. So where is that? That is here. That is along the Rhine River. That's what's in red down the center of this map here. So we have Germany and we have France and we have Switzerland and Belgium and Netherlands. So in between Germany and France is this region that used to be called Palinate. It is along the Rhine River. It's highlighted both on both of these maps in kind of the lighter color here. So it was under originally the rule of the Holy Roman Empire. It was the land of Count Palatine. Um, I wanted to know, like why everybody is coming from this area. Why? So I looked it up. I went into it. It basically, this region of the world had been under about 100 years of war. So in the late 1500s, it became heavily Protestant and they formed a union. In the 1618, it started the 30 Years' War, which led to 96 years of fighting. That was in 1618. So most of our relatives came, around that time or after. In 1688, France invaded, and the Pennsylvania Dutch, so the German region that we know as the Pennsylvania Dutch, so a lot of our ancestors, most of them moved to America at that time. In 1701, there was a Spanish succession and France invaded again. In 1708, there was a bad winter and farming was bad and people needed to get out. So William Penn went looking for recruiting people for his colony, Pennsylvania. So he came here, he went to England and he asked, England if he could allow free citizenship. So England did. They allowed free citizenship to the colonies at this time without any indentured servitude. So this was, the early 1700s. People started coming over and they didn't have to be slaves. After World War II, it became Rhineland, Pfalz, Palinate. Several 100,000 refugees migrated here after World War II from East Germany. So they kind of repopulated the areas. And it was one of the poorest regions after World War II. So any of our relatives that come over a little bit later, I don't think we have any after World War II, actually, no. But also, this region in France on the left-hand side, it's like the same place. But so we'll see a lot of like that show up as where people came from, or it will say Palinate or Rhineland or Alsace. It is one of the more fertile places in Europe. There was a lot of farming and a lot of vineyards. So it makes a whole lot of sense that they came here and they started farming. So we have tons of farm. Everyone was a farmer. Everyone was a farmer or a teacher. I'm more interested, if I dive back into this, looking up census records and seeing what everybody had listed, but it's mostly farmers. It's always farmers. And if you need a refresher of the original colonies, that's here in pink. And then Ohio was in the Northwest Territory until after the Revolutionary War, and then they opened up and gave people land there. And they came west on these wagons. So a lot of the people in our family came across on wagons just like this one, with babies or pregnant or everything they owned, and they had to wait until the rivers were frozen to cross the Ohio River and hope for the best. At one point, I started kind of putting hearts on where people were coming from, but it was very daunting. It was really daunting. So I gave up on that. But this kind of, you can see some places where people, some of these hearts might be some of Dan's family though too. But like up here at the top is where the fabulous Richard Jacquot came over um, the river and was transporting men back into New York from Canada to help fight in the war. Um, a lot I went into with my last presentation. I'm getting long here now too, but I was then interested in what native populations were there when we took over the land because our people came and we took over and pushed people out of both Pennsylvania, and so here's some maps shown there, and Ohio. So these are kind of the tribes that were here at the time. They were nomadic, and then I found these interesting as well. So you can see kind of the red map on the left is where native tribes, or no, actually that's the earthworks in Ohio. So all of our native earthworks that have been built, and then the one on the right shows native paths, their pathways. So walking. So they actually, this map on the left is pretty similar to our state routes, which is interesting, which also makes sense why we had a lot of family members that came into eastern Ohio and then they went up northwest to like the Sandusky region. They were following all these trails here and trying to get away from natives or find land. Let's see. Yeah. My last thing is I found Rutherford B. Hayes. While we are not related to him, our family comes from the same place he does. So the picture on the left is just because I found him attractive as a young man, and I've never seen him as a young man. So there you go, some old man eye candy. The picture on the right is what we think of as Rutherford B. Hayes, the president. He was the 19th president from 1877 to 1881. He lived in Ohio. He was the governor of Ohio. He retired to Ohio. He ended up in Fremont, which is where the majority of our family is from. Um, he's buried in a lot of the same cemetery as a lot of our family members as well. So there's no way in my mind that we as a family did not rub shoulders with Rutherford B. Hayes, because our family and him were both very integral in making of some of the towns in northern Ohio. Um, so this is what I have. That's all I got. Hopefully you guys have more information and I didn't mess up people's names too badly. Um, yeah. Good luck. Love you guys. Hope this works for you. And I'm out.